those three interviews, starting with 2007 and then going to 2008 and then going to 2011.
To lead us into that, where did these visions come from? When did they begin in your life?
Well, I've been clairvoyant for a long time. It really turned on with adolescence and all the biochemical changes that go on at that time. But I mainly dealt with spirit guides and development, and so it was a little while before I got hit with an intense period of visions. Is the only way to describe them. They were in the dream state, but I would be fully conscious as a normal person is, and fully conscious of what I was seeing and experiencing, feeling, tasting, smelling, the environment. And I really was only seeing about 12 different events in the future, but I was seeing them repeatedly, night after night, for several years. It was pretty much forcing me to believe what I was seeing. And I feel like in present time, that was 10 years ago, I feel like, now it's more of, it's happening. It's not, these are future time events. I kind of sit in horror Googling Russia and looking at what they're doing each month, because these were things that I saw 10 years ago. So it's quite a concerning period for me right now with regards to the stuff that I've seen.
Nuclear weapons is the topic at hand. What have you seen?
Well, I do see war coming. Initially, I saw 9/11, a terrorist attack on New York. I saw it kind of awakening the war machines on the planet. I saw a period of silence as people took sides. I clearly saw an alliance between Russia and China. To me, I believe that alliance and some of these plans have been there before 9/11. And so the whole Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a very serious threat. So, unfortunately, the next phase that I see with this war is a sudden attack. I don't think Russia is fooling around when they throw their hands up about the missile shield or Kosovo or all the other issues that they have. I've been watching China arm itself over the last few years, and they've done a very good job at that. And now suddenly it's Russia's turn to start to arm themselves. And I've complained the whole time that, during this time Russia will kind of sit back and seem like a non-threat while China does the dirty work, because they have the military, they have the people to be able to do this. And as far as nuclear concerns, the visions that I've had were very specific about what would happen, because right now people count on MAD as a way of avoiding nuclear war, especially between these large powers. And unfortunately, I don't think every leader in the world, and certainly throughout history, is logical and sane, per se. And so I believe they have ideas or ways to go around that. I think Russia and China just think the size of their land alone, compared to the teeny tiny space of the United States, is an advantage on their part. They've kind of built a case against the United States ever since, especially Iraq, but since we've caused 2 wars since 9/11, they've built a huge case. I see some Russian leader, whether it's Putin or not, I can't tell, but there is an antichrist leader coming from Russia who's going to kickstart everything, and he'll build the case against America, and he'll wage war against America. And I see Americans not even being aware of this. I see one day us waking up just like 9/11 to missiles landing in Washington, D.C. and along the East Coast. And it doesn't take long for America to fall.
Leon, there's a lot happening right now. What time period did you feel, or was there an attributed time period to this?
Oh, well, I have definitely been bothered by these visions, and I would like to know when myself, and I've prayed and I've asked and tried to figure out how these things occur. And the only answer I have is I have seen a series of events that happen in a certain order. So San Francisco is due for a big earthquake. We always talk about the big earthquake, but I actually see 2 very specific earthquakes coming to the Bay Area, a magnitude 7 in the county of Marin, with the force hitting the populated area of Marin, and the county of Marin being isolated for 3 days to a week. And very serious earthquake, and then 3 months later a second earthquake, an 8-point earthquake that literally destroys San Francisco and destroys the surrounding cities. They'll never rebuild San Francisco. This is the fall of San Francisco, and although Katrina knocked out New Orleans, the American ego of rebuild and we can never fall still lies there, and this will be the first time where an American city is going to fall. And to me, I see that as the earth warning us as Americans to get us ready for how to live in an environment. If our environment threatens to fall, what will happen to us? And I can guarantee you, you will see on the news when these earthquakes happen, people react, because there'll be areas in San Francisco where people are looting and stealing and raping. Areas south of Market, you'll find people walking around in shock and confusion. You'll see people in total denial trying to get to work amongst the rubble. So you'll see what Americans react when their reality falls. And it's really shortly after that that I see the war start, within months. And unfortunately, I'm always feeling like it's any time. I feel like the earthquakes are around the holiday season. But I'll tell you, Russia is just scares me.
All right, that was a lot of information. Now you also have things about earth changes, and we're going to go through that as well. Are these things that are going to occur and really kick off, kind of like a domino effect, where it all kind of really starts to drop one after the other about the same time that war is underway, World War?
Yeah, I feel they're directly connected. I feel like there's a lull in natural disasters in present time. I feel like there's still time for change. And so I feel like these massive disasters that I talk about and lots of people talk about for the end times are directly connected to war. And the more imminent it is, and the less probable that reality is not going to change, that's when these things happen. And that's why I can't really say when these earthquakes come, because my feeling is that all these types of disasters will intensify as humankind becomes more and more violent. And I think unfortunately, there are powerful people in the world, so I think a select few of people can decide when they want to do this, and if they get that set into motion where it can't be changed, that's when we're going to really start to see this stuff.
Now, for those watching this program, we did report on this program, and other programs have been discussing that if you take a look at America today, where the military is supposedly prepared to deal with a disaster, they've moved to the middle of America. They're in Colorado. They're in Wyoming. NORAD and U.S. Northcom are in the same area now, since NORAD recently moved in to Northcom's bunker. I mean, they're in the same area, and there are a lot of different people out there, Leon, with these maps that they've made based on what they've seen about the future of the landscape of the continent of North America. You have one that you put up on your website. We got that graphic up now. What are we looking at here?
Well, you're looking at the areas that are hit by either the Chinese or the Russians or by natural disasters. When the East Coast is hit by earthquakes, you are going to see an exodus of people leaving California and leaving the West Coast. Seattle is also an area affected by volcanoes, and also San Diego has a 6.5 earthquake. And so a lot of people are going to be moving out of the area, and in the future that's going to be where the Chinese troops are going to want to make landfall and work their way in. On the other side, on the East Coast, is where you're going to have the missiles landing, and that's pretty much the shock for America. That's the fall, and it terrorizes everyone along the East Coast. So they're going to be fleeing west, and you're also going to have corrupt people on the East Coast congregating around the Mississippi Valley area. You know, people that have dark thoughts, or people that are violent, people that find this as an opportunity to will, for whatever reason, not pass that Mississippi River Valley area. So they congregate there. It's not a safe place. I would not want to be there.
What you don't seem to see, Leon, neither does my heart tell me that that's going to happen, is some sort of patriotic revolution in the country to where we take back Congress, we change things, we get the fiscal budget back on track, we bring back accountability in our government, we become more sustainable, and we reverse the things that are already in the works. You see that at all at this point?
Honestly, it doesn't even matter at this point. I mean, if you just look at Putin, his attitude with his shirt off and his attitude, he has already built a case against us. China has already built a case against us. They're not going to let that fuel go. I mean, the mess that we've caused the last few years, they're going to pounce on that. So I think it just doesn't even matter what happens internally.
All right. So let's bring the conversation now to the Rocky Mountains.
Well, no one's going to win America in this war. So they will try and they will attack us, and we will fall as a society as we know it. But we won't be captured. Some of the Chinese will capture people, and I feel very sorry for those people. But there's a strong brigade in the Rocky Mountains, and the Chinese really won't pass that brigade. And it's a stalemate, and the war will get more complicated between Russia and China, and it'll involve the Middle East, and Japan's involved, and so there's stuff going on all over the place. So our troops and also our armed civilians are going to pull together. I see in the Rocky Mountains families, I see strong fathers who would kill to protect their wives and their children. And I see these people getting together. I also see divinity. I see angels, large beings in the earth that are calling people to these areas and preventing other people from coming in. I know people worry about nuclear war, but the nuclear aspect in this war, as far as I've seen it, is very limited and very, very specific.
I had a talk with a friend of mine the other day that's been in the conspiratorial / psychic world for a very, very long time. It's someone whose opinion that I respect. This person, and everyone has their right to believe what they want to believe, but she definitely saw divine intervention of some form stopping all-out nuclear war. As if, like, you know, and it kind of goes with what Blue Water was saying on my program last week. You know, we're going to go real down low and experience a lot of stuff we don't want to experience, but there'll be a point to where enough is enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think we receive a lot of messages, I know for myself in particular, that is specific about nukes and about being protected and the Creator not allowing certain things to happen. And so I was specifically told that no nuke would ever be detonated in America. I was specifically told that the rules of nuclear war, when all hell breaks loose, is any country, Russia and China, will stick to conventional weapons, and they will let us know before the first strike that they will stick to conventional weapons. But they will also let us know that any country that uses one single nuke will be retaliated with the carpet bombing of the arsenal from both Russia and China. And no one's foolish enough to do that. And I know our government can be somewhat psychotic, but they're not that psychotic to risk 300 million lives just to try and scare them away from invading us. They'll try to get other countries to do that, and eventually they will get Israel to do that because they'll see Russia coming through Syria to attack them, and they will have a deal in the Middle East. They will bring peace. When they attack America, they will force peace in the Middle East because of the oil reserves, and they know that if America's under attack, Israel will be upset, and Russia and China, I don't know the exact details, but probably through force or treaty of non-aggression, keep them from fighting during the time that America's at war. But eventually Israel will see Russia coming through Syria, and they will be the first to use a nuke to try to deter them, and they will get nuked back. I saw at least 30 nuclear explosions in Israel. It looked like a disaster, you know, beyond the scientific calculations. They may have detonated Israelis' own nuclear stockpile. It's worse than what they think it was going to be, and it does upset China with regards to Russia, and they'll turn on each other in the very end. And in the visions, it was communicated that these things were allowed to happen just to show us how far we could go. as a species, as humans, how dark we can go and how capable we are. And that's also part of the Russian Antichrist sitting on the throne of Israel and laughing because he's the one that's wiped off Israel off the map. But at the same time, during this war, I've seen rapture, the divine entities from the other realms that are here. Again, I come back to string theory, and there are other dimensions coexisting in the room with you right now. There are angels and sometimes dark entities, and these angelic entities are here, and they will intervene, and they will open up fissures. I've had very specific visions about this with the Japanese because they'll be attacked by the Chinese very quickly. And I've seen 99% of the Japanese people taken off the planet before they even realize anything happens. I'd see an earthquake in Tokyo that would have killed hundreds of thousands, but minutes before that earthquake, in someone's living room while they're eating dinner, a fissure opens up, a divine being steps in, and the feeling of euphoria and trust, and it also materialize in a way that that family can accept. So if it's an angel, maybe that would work for a Christian group. If it's whatever will work, so whatever that person can accept on a psychological level, and they'll be able to step in, and they won't really realize what's going on, but they'll step back and they'll be watching the earth and watching everything unfold and watching it rebirth and coming back onto the planet. So in many visions, specifically, at least 75% of us survive this and are
75% of the population will survive what's coming?
Yeah, it's not about sinning. It's not about being good or bad. It's not about being Christian or Muslim or Jewish. It's partly about your ability to change and your willingness to let go of this world, and for evil people to let go of that part of it. So that's very hard for Americans because we don't want to let go of money. So when 911 happened, it scares us because that's our survival. But you have to be able to handle that psychological transition. So the only people I saw in Japan was 99%, and the only Japanese that didn't go through rapture were seriously mental ill, and they just mentally couldn't even open that door up.
Leon, we're out of time, but before we go, and I want to thank you for appearing, first of all, on this broadcast. Second, I definitely want to do an update with you, at least in the next year, to see where we are between now and then. I want you to take us out with this concept of raising our awareness, raising our consciousness, and, as you say, unblocking our energy. For those listening right now that are feeling what you're feeling what I'm feeling, and really want to take that step, whatever that means, to move forward as we get ready to experience this crap.
Well, there's lots of different ways of doing that, and the first thing I always recommend is talking to the Creator, whatever that means for you. Whomever or whatever created you and created this universe, saying hello to that and asking that force to help you get your own answers. Psychics sometimes look like we know things that other people don't know, but when I read somebody, when I give someone a reading and I'm able to kind of help them understand what's going on, it's not because I know something, it's because I'm looking within them and they're showing me what they're stuck on and what the problem is and what they need to do to get out of it. So we all have our own answers as spirits in our own bodies. So making that connection to the Creator and just asking questions and expecting answers and looking for those answers is really the first way to do that, because there's lots of things out in this world, and some are booby traps. There's gurus out there that aren't nice people, but there's also teachers that can help you to help yourself. That's what you really want. So by starting with the Creator, you can't go wrong that way.
And that can be found
exactly where you want to go.
And that can be found within?
Very easily. It's just being open-minded and expecting an answer. The Creator is an obviously intelligent entity, and when you're in your mind and falling asleep and you're thinking, hey, Creator, what's going on, and can you show me what's happening? Now, I'm sure some of the big things in your life that you're totally freaked out on, you may not be neutral enough to get an answer to, so pick something simple. Something that's not totally charged, that's life or death, and, you know how our lives can be. So people will pray to God about the biggest problems and the things they're most stuck on, but developing and expecting those answers. So you ask questions about, show me, give me your presence in my day tomorrow. Supreme Being, give me a hello in a way that I can really clearly see, and no is only coming from you. So it's creating that relationship. And so when I say expecting an answer, so you ask those questions and just expect and look in your environment for that answer. It'll come. My first step in clairvoyant development was just writing down writing a letter to God, asking a question, and sticking it in a Bible. And I did that for 3 months, and at the end of 3 months I went through it and looked at all these letters and just threw on the floor the ones that I got answers to, and I was shocked at how many piles of paper were sitting on the floor in 3 months' time. And that's when I'm like, there's some intelligence.
Something just seems to open up inside of you once you open up that doorway of energy. Leon, I want to thank you very much for coming on. Leon, Legant.com. It's been a pleasure.
Our guest tonight on Outside the Box calls in from San Francisco, California. Leon Legant is a clairvoyant and psychic. You can check out his website, www.leonlegant.com. He's had a number of visions that he's written about on the web about a future war taking place in our own country. Leon, how are you?
Yeah, hey Alex, good to see you.
Glad to have you back. Before we jump into our discussion tonight, our topic, tell myself and my audience a little bit about yourself and your practice.
Well, I'm a natural clairvoyant. It was something that I was born with, but I didn't know about it until my adolescence, when my neurochemistry changed and hormones started changing, and suddenly I was psychic and clairvoyant and starting to see ghosts and entities, and strange stuff started happening, and I needed to develop my abilities. And we have psychic schools, believe it or not, where you can develop your abilities, and so that's where I went and developed at a very young age, and I've been doing this professionally for well over 15 years. And during that time, one of my, I guess you could say, gifts is precognition, having visions like lucid dreams, where you're basically fully conscious, but in a dream having an experience of a future time event.
At what time did you begin to get visions and dreams about World War III?
Well, initially, I think I had a nervous tension about that. Just early on, just with my adolescence, as my abilities were starting to turn on. And it wasn't until I finished my clairvoyant training that I went through about a 3 to 4 year period of just one vision after another of either natural disasters or wartime events or moves by what I call the final Antichrist or Russian leader and those type events. And they basically tapered off because I couldn't stand it, frankly. It was scary. It was a scary time in my life. That was over 10 years ago of having those visions, seeing those events. They were so lucid and they were so real that it was almost like going through the experience. And I literally just begged God, stop it, because I couldn't tell time. I didn't know when these things were going to happen. At that time, an alliance between Russia and China was unheard of, and so I had no way of gauging when these events were going to happen, and they were pretty scary to me, so I managed to just block them out until 911. Then when 911 happened, that was kind of one of the first things that, that's really when World War III started. I think that's what a lot of people already say that, and people that would look back in time would say that that's when World War III started. And that was something that I saw in those visions. And now recently, everything that Putin has been doing and the way the new president has been put up and Putin steps back but still retains power, and just all his threats and all that stuff was stuff that I saw a long time ago. And it's very concerning. It's quite frightening.
It is, although we are going to discuss it, maybe on the other side, on the tail end of the conversation about the war, we can talk about, as you say, unblocking your energies. While a lot of us are already the choir to a certain degree, people are looking for a way to
to keep a hold of themselves and be healthy on a psychological, spiritual, physical way at the same time while they're reading about these things. I've been talking to a lot of different people through email, vice versa, that have had similar visions, similar feelings. I've looked around the web. I sent you a link briefly last night. And there are other people as well that have seen this potential scenario play out. And there are a couple specifics that they bring up and you bring up as well in terms of how it could unfold. Can we walk through this just a little bit? I noticed that one of the themes was the instability, if you will, of the West Coast, the Chinese troops, and the Russians, of course, taking the East Coast.
Yeah, I want to reiterate that there is a happy ending to all of this. So even though we're going to go into detail of some doom and gloom type stuff, there is a happy ending, and there is a way to be able to navigate all of this without losing yourself to post-traumatic stress, that's how serious for Americans things can possibly get. And so I think for us Americans, what we're going to start to see is, we're already hearing the rhetoric and we're seeing the posturing between the East and the West, and we'll continue to hear that as time goes on. But then we're going to start to see natural disasters in our country, so we're going to be gripped by the television watching things happening on the West Coast, like earthquakes in the Bay Area. You guys have a volcano in Seattle and earthquakes in San Diego. So there's going to be a lot of activity in a very short period of time that's going to have all of America gripped to the television, just kind of watching things unfold. That's what I've been shown is the precursor just before the war starts. Even though you see all this posturing going on today in the news and this rhetoric coming out of Russia and sometimes out of China, I don't see them attacking us tomorrow. They need to build a case against us in the international community, and they do have a tremendous amount of fuel, as you know, things that we've done, places that we've destabilized, and even this move in Kosovo, the attitude, the announcement that Russia has made about that is basically to the international community to make America look like it's violating international law. So they need to spend time making us an enemy in the world. And so that's what we're going to be seeing out of the new president of Russia, and we're going to be hearing Putin speaking much more violently, much more militarily about handling America. So we're going to see that kind of shift happening, but we're going to have some time. That's going to give us a little time to enjoy life as Americans and be able to have that. So we'll see these natural disasters, I think, come in first, I'm hoping.
I remember you had mentioned that San Francisco in particular. Once we see that, if what you're saying actually ends up being accurate, and I notice other people have said the same thing, an earthquake in the San Francisco Bay Area could be the thing that triggers some other things that eventually lead to the invasion.
Yeah, being a native to San Francisco, I was born here and I grew up in Marin County. This is my home. I know it very, very well. So, of course, that was a series of visions that were very upsetting and very scary to me and very interesting in a way, very detailed, showing me a series of earthquakes, not just one but two in a row. First a 7, and then about 3 months later, an 8-point earthquake in the Bay Area. And the first one is so shocking. Us Americans in general, and I can say for Californians for sure, don't really know what an earthquake is capable of. And we look at Northridge and we look at Loma Prieta and we think, oh, that's what a 7-point earthquake is. Well, you don't really know, because the force from those earthquakes were headed in the opposite direction of the populated areas, and they were way off in the mountains. The Loma Prieta, the 89 earthquake, was not even a Bay Area earthquake. So when the next 7-point earthquake hits in the Bay Area, and it hits a Bay Area county, and if the force is directed towards the populated areas, it's much more severe than what we have seen. It's looking more like something you would see from an 8.0, something far more intense. So, fortunately, I've seen a very low death toll with that. I've just seen people isolated in Marin County for up to a week before the military comes in. We're going to be seeing military evacuations of San Francisco, up and down the peninsula, the East Bay. I mean, it's going to be a very big drama that we're all going to be involved in, whether you live here or not, because it's going to be on the television 24/7. So we're all going to be living this. Especially that first week is going to be a week of mourning for the whole entire nation. And I kind of, if these things do unfold the way I've seen them, thank God for that 7-point earthquake, because the 8-point earthquake that follows a few months later is so severe that it completely destroys the San Francisco Bay Area. And if we hadn't had that earlier earthquake and people hadn't gotten out of there, we would have seen a lot more death. It would have been a lot more horrifying. And it's within months after that that the Chinese start coming in through the West Coast and begin their invasion.
One of the posts that I was reading that was very similar to what you were saying pinpointed Astoria as one spot and places along the Oregon coast.
Yeah, I see it up and down all over. The hot spots are California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Idaho is on the edge there, and Arizona is on the edge there, and those are areas that they're going to capture and claim, and I wouldn't want to be anywhere in those locations when they begin their invasion. The Russians and the Chinese are going to start with a bang. It's not going to be anything. I've seen most Americans not even knowing why we're being attacked or who's attacking us.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We had some anti-terror drills here in Portland that you may have heard about or read about, Top Off 4. And this was taking place as they had war games across the sea shortly after the announcement of the joint military drills between China and Russia under the SCO. And that wasn't even in the press as part of why perhaps we were engaged in those drills in Portland, Oregon, in Guam, and Phoenix.
Yeah, well, that's why I'd say we're looking at some real serious posturing going on here. Even the satellite that was allegedly falling out of orbit and us having to shoot that down is really just, that's us kind of reacting to China and Russia and letting them know that if you mess with us, we can play these games too, because we already know that China can do that. And again, to me, that's alarming when you see that kind of behavior going off. But, most Americans, I can't really say why most of us aren't going to know. I mean, obviously the people listening to you are going to know, but most people aren't going to know what's going on, and I can't really say why that is. There's so many channels that we can flip through, and some of us don't like to watch the news, and we're just not aware that there's a missile defense shield, and there's these things that are going on in the world, and that's why they want to blow us up.
I want to ask you this, Leon, real quick. I want to keep my questions around what you've seen, but just to pause here, in our own research on this show, we've also read reports about a lot of cooperation between these countries while they also prepare themselves for war, which I find to be a little bit strange. Now, I don't think that we're going to get all the answers in time, but there is something strange about our country giving Russia nuclear reactors and then giving it to Iran. There's something strange about the relationship that we have had historically with China and our buildup of that country to a certain degree and the control of China through the UN, their one-child policy that's been looked favorably upon by like Kissinger and the Rockefeller family. So there's a lot of questions I'm still asking about the strange relationships that still go on behind the scenes with these organizations, with these powerful figures that operate behind closed doors.
The best I can figure with that, is there Illuminati? Are they all kind of doing different things? Or what's the deal? What's the underground deal there? The best I can really see with that, and when I look at the Russians and the Chinese, is I see very old people and very old ways of thinking. So I see very old communist ways of handling things and very old plans. And I think the Chinese and the Russians especially, have probably been planning this ever since they lost World War II. I mean, at least some divisions of Russian generals have been off, figuring what they can do, and the plans have maybe gotten quite dramatic and often patient. That's why I can say, breathe easy for the next year more than likely, because they're very patient. They need to build that case up, and they've been very patient since 9/11 and allowed America to basically make an ass of itself across the world, so that when they do attack us, they can be the heroes and they can justify their reasons for attacking us.
Yeah, for some reason
they old thinking.
They certainly want to downplay it in our own media. They thought it was just simply interesting when the Russian government announced, when I say they, I mean the spokesman for the Pentagon, said that it was just merely interesting when Putin announced that they were going to be on a regular basis having bomber patrol units going up and down the Atlantic. This is about the same time they planted the flag over by the Arctic. So it's very, very interesting that Al-Qaeda seems to stay in the news to a certain degree, but these conflicts are out of the news to a certain degree.
Well, I don't like to even talk about or even post on the internet, but with as far as the Middle East is concerned, and I mean, America's not going to say anything about that because they don't want to threaten us. That's why they're not going to tell us this satellite deal is part of the missile shield and part of letting China and Russia know that they'll knock their satellites out if they dare attack us as well. I mean, that's too scary to talk about. That's why we need people like you so that we can talk about this stuff. But they're not going to admit to that kind of thing. That goes against everything that they stand for.
Let's go back to what you see in terms of after the earthquake, and then from there we can have a deeper discussion about realizing who we are and to a certain degree where we are as these things transpire around us on a spiritual note. But in terms of the physical, what else do you see about that same time that the Chinese take the West Coast?
Well, I see it starting with a missile attack. I just see us one day as Americans waking up and seeing that we're being bombarded by conventional missiles, especially on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. And I see these missile attacks as very precise and hitting government installations. I see it being very clean. I see it scaring us, and especially people that live along the East Coast, and so they're all packing up their cars and driving and flooding the highways. We already have a mass exodus that's going on from the West Coast, and we also have like FEMA and our troops on the West Coast because of the disasters and everything that's going on there. So it's kind of the beginning, and I think they're just going to watch us fall apart internally before the troops actually come in, because the troops are going to be called quote-unquote peacekeepers, and they'll be Russian-led, but most of the troops will be Chinese, so it'll be both Russians and Chinese coming in, and they'll be coming up to Americans saying, our way is a better way. They have a plan, and if you follow our way, everything will be good for you, and it will be. They'll take you in and they'll give you a little implant in your hand that'll have cash value that you can build your new life with, and so it'll be very seductive and it'll seem very, very peaceful to some people. Of course, other people aren't going to go for that, especially people that are going to, see that as a mark of the beast and a scary anti-Christian thing to do. And they'll be in for it. They'll go into the prison camps. They'll get the retinal eye scanners to ID who they are and in their system, and just keep them locked up. And again, those are the states that I mentioned that I wouldn't want to be in: California and Oregon and Washington.
Yeah. In the meantime, where do you see our government?
Fighting really hard. I mean, first they're going to withdraw from overseas, so they're going to withdraw from the Middle East. There is this policy that's going to be out there about nuclear weapons, because people think MAD is what keeps this from happening, but Russia has been saying and China has been saying for a while now, and they'll make it quite clear when they declare war on America, that if the first country that uses a nuke in this war will receive the entire stockpile of Russia and China right back in response. And so nobody's going to want to do that. So they'll withdraw completely out of the Middle East except for Israel, and they'll want Israel to use one of their nukes to help deal with what's going on in there. But our troops are going to come home to defend the homeland, and they're going to set up along the Rocky Mountains, and that's why I don't see them getting any farther. They're getting into California and Nevada, but they're not getting much past that. And that's because our boys, not only the people that are trained, but even armed civilians are fighting back, and I never really see them winning. I just see this gruesome aspect in California and states like that. And I also see a gruesome aspect along the Mississippi River from our own evils as Americans. There are some greedy, evil Americans out there, and they're going to congregate along the Mississippi River Valley for whatever reason. and be violent on each other. And so there is this safe zone along the Rocky Mountains, and it's just east of the Rocky Mountains where the good people are, where the fighters are there, the fathers with guns who are willing to protect their wives, and all the people that are kind of being gathered together by the Creator, basically, for the next step, for what happens after this war. Because really what's going to end this war is an act of God. It's not a man's thing. That's why I can use the term Antichrist, because I use that term as a man who thinks his way is the best way, a human way of creating the world, or a person who thinks that they have the solution. So, that's what Hitler was doing. He had the ideal world that he wanted to go and create, and that was a man ego-based concept. It had nothing to do with the Creator. And so the final Antichrist, this final Russian leader that comes up and starts to strike and then gains power from it, and is going to seduce the rest of the world. I mean, us Americans are going to suffer, but for 3.5 years, the rest of the world is just going to sit back and let us take it.
Yeah, it's like I'm reading this headline from Paul Craig Roberts. Great guy, great columnist, but his headline's like, who's going to stop the neocon agenda? And he starts to talk about Russia, almost as if they're the good guy in the situation. A lot of people are developing that mindset. Who can we look to in terms of a superpower to defend us from the evil Americans? Now, this is taking place as the military is being broken down. We have an article we'll get to after you're on about how Schwarzenegger is upset in California about how all the National Guard gear is missing, a lot of it, Humvees, other equipment, because in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's not even being returned, let alone damaged, it's not even being returned. And you mentioned that these things would happen after our own country comes down a couple notches. What do you see in regards to that, knowing what we know about the UN saying that they may have to provide the United States with food rations if the economy implodes? We see a lot of people in the economic elite in our own country, in the global marketplace, getting their money out of the United States. Where do you see America in the next year economically?
The only thing I can first of all, I'm not a banker. I could care less about money, so I don't focus that much on it, but I am aware of its impact in the world stage. And so if we have I'm not sure what's going to happen. I personally think we're going to have a good year. Not necessarily financially, but as Americans, our lives are going to be better. This is actually a better year than last year, say. But what will happen is when our economy starts to negatively impact the international community, that's when you're going to find Russia coming forward and blaming and using those kinds of scenarios, which they're already doing, to make us the enemy, that our way of us forcing our way into other countries and into other systems and other worlds is how they're going to get us.
So what you're saying is this can come as a total shock. Life can be going on as usual. You're talking about the television sets reporting the chaos from the natural disasters prior to the invasion. So you're saying there'll be a somewhat of a level of stability prior to that.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, things will get bad and things will get worse in those terms. You know, the natural disasters are going to have an economic impact. Losing San Francisco, there's no way you can't have a massive economic impact from losing San Francisco. So those things are going to happen, but I don't see it as like this kind of crisis. The crisis is the day the missiles start to shower down, and that's the day we lose power, and that's the day we're now having to cook on open fires. That's the day where we lose being America. That's the day where America falls in an hour. And so all those other things, all these threats that are going on, that's why I say live it up this year. This is a good year. This is the year to enjoy being American. Go out and buy something if you can.
Get something to help you cook that food, maybe, perhaps, or maybe some water containers, too, as well, I guess, while the dollar is still working to a certain degree. Let me ask you this, Leon. How do your visions work, your dreams work in terms of time? Can you see time in terms of the year? Some people say, you know, it's just a dream, it's just something you see or you experience in a lucid fashion, but there's no date attached.
You know, I've had lots of dreams. I've had regular dreams that are dreamy dreams. I've had dreams that are in color, dreams that I barely remember, dreams that I remember later, dreams that are lucid, dreams that are And there's a very distinct difference in a precognitive dream. When I have a precognitive dream, I feel like it maybe has already happened. The last one I had, I sent to you, is the Russian sub, that there was a Russian sub in San Francisco Bay surveying and finding the coordinates for the missile shield for when they strike. And when I wake up the next day, I feel like maybe that sub is in the bay right now, and this is happening now, and that's how real it really feels. So there's a pretty big distinction in that. Plus, there is life experience from it that started in my teens. So the first thing I ever saw was Northridge happening. Just having a lucid dream, seeing a sign of LA and a newscaster saying LA has just had a 7-point earthquake, and then seeing these overpasses all collapse. And it was so real to me that I woke up the next day thinking it had happened, and got up and turned on the news and looked at it and I spent all day looking at CNN trying to figure out where the and there was no earthquake. And it wasn't until 8 months later that then we're seeing on LA these helicopter views of all the overpasses that collapsed from the. So I've had these experiences with this. So I don't know when these things are happening. I just know that when I watch Putin say the things that he's saying and the statements that are coming out of Russia and the movements and the posturing, it feels very, very close.
It's
very,
like
very near.
It's like, at what point will this rhetoric end the war begin? And I'm looking at resource depletion and a lot of maneuvering just over that issue alone. What is your take, though, on earthquakes? Because there have been a number of them in Indonesia in a short span of time recently. There was just one in Nevada, I believe, and there was one in the UK recently, and there are some others happening around the world in a short span of time. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I was just looking at that. I do think we are having a pole shift. I mean, I think we're actually scientifically able to register and verify that that's going on. But there is a point in time where literally that magnetic field reverses. And so I think there's some kind of shift happening in there that's triggering these earthquakes in odd locations where we don't normally see them. And, if that gets worse, it could trigger more and trigger the plates. And I've had visions of the Pacific plate specifically twisting counterclockwise and building pressure up in Mexico and causing earthquakes from San Diego, of course the ones I've mentioned in San Francisco, and then volcanic activity in Oregon and Washington. And we've been seeing signs of that with earthquakes, underwater earthquakes off of Eureka. Signs that plate could possibly start shifting and moving.
There's also,
but I see it becoming very, very active, and Japan also needs to watch out. Japan's going to be pounded by big, big earthquakes, and so they're getting warned with these big earthquakes on the outside. They'll work their way inward and start hitting the cities and causing damage.
let's get back to the middle of America where a lot of people unite, you say in the mountain range. And you do say that there is light at the end of the tunnel over a period of time, after a period of time. What does that look like again in terms of the war ending?
Well, again, I see an act of God ending the war. You know, part of the UFO phenomena, seeing UFOs over cities, is part of that, the signs of things to come. And I believe in rapture, and I understand the background if you do the research on rapture and who started the story of rapture and where it came from. And some people view that story as a reason not to believe in rapture, and I view that as a reason to believe in rapture, because the origins, even though there are American origins of rapture, are not that old. The origins are from a dream, and it's from a little girl dreaming about being taken off the earth in the end days and brought right up into heaven and brought back to the new earth. And I'm a dreamer, and I dream these dreams too, and I've dreamt that hundreds of times, and that's probably the first dream I ever remember was looking up in the sky one day and seeing the sky filled with UFOs, different shapes and sizes and colors, and it felt good, and there was a feeling of hope. And then since I've had many other versions of that and seen that, so as I've seen Japan falling, I've seen people in a kind of a quantum mechanical way taken from where they are out of their apartment or their home just before the earthquake hits and being taken to this other realm. I see it working in a way, it's very quantum mechanical, so it needs to work in a way that their mind will be able to process and understand. So some people, it would be okay for an extraterrestrial to beam down and say, hey, we need to get off the planet, and beam up to a UFO, because their mind could handle that. For some people with different religious backgrounds, they might need an angel to kind of open a big gateway of light and say, come on, let's, take a lift here. Or for someone, so whatever is going to work is how that's going to happen. And that's going to happen, as soon as the earthquake starts. So I would say even as soon as the Marin earthquake starts happening, people will be taken in rapture, and you won't even know about it. You won't be hearing about that in the news. What you'll be hearing about is all the people missing and presumed dead. But you won't know that they were taken in rapture, and they're on a UFO or a holographic reality that's comfortable for them. So you imagine an old grandma who's used to the casino. She might be in a holographic casino waiting until it's time to come back to the earth. So when the war's over, and then the physical ending of the war is when it's all moved to the Middle East, because this war is on America for 3.5 years, but then eventually Russia will move through Syria and head towards Israel to attack. And once Israel sees that, they will be the first ones to use a tactical nuke, and they'll try to scare them away with one nuke, and Russia and China will follow through on their threat and blow up Israel with their entire nuclear arsenal, and it melts. And then that's the moment when all the UFOs and Christ literally is coming down and maybe even reversing the damage that's being done, cleansing. Had a vision of watching the earth make the transition from this dimension to the next dimension from the perspective of being on a UFO. And I was being instructed by Christ what I was seeing and what was going on. And so once this happens, the earth kind of makes a dimensional shift. Part of the reason darkness and evil and pain and death and sadness exists is quantum. It's a particle. You would call it the Lucifer particle. And when this shift happens, it's like pulling it through a strainer, pulling the earth and our reality through a strainer and removing that Lucifer particle and now no longer is there this violence and darkness and evil and yucky stuff. And once the earth's been cleansed, that's when everyone can be repopulated. So the people that are living will come back, and they're going to have this fantastic, amazing story about God and how cool God is, and the old earth and how fucked up that was, and why we really need to live in harmony with the Creator.
Leon, I'm going to hold you over for about 3 more minutes. For those watching, in 5 minutes' time, we will take your phone calls to get your reaction to this topic. Leon, why do so many roads seem to lead to 2012?
Well, I guess that's the moment time in this world ends. I mean, everyone's looking at the same thing. It brings me to what you've been saying the whole time, and I did actually have a vision of this when I first got on the internet. I had a dream that I was dreaming that other people were dreaming the same dreams, and that as I posted on the internet, I'd start to notice and see other people that were also having the same dreams.
I found it too, and I've had them too.
So I think we're all dreaming the same dream, and whether it's us living now or 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, because in one of those references, Washington saw this coming, and so we're all dreaming the same dream. And if it was the Egyptians or the Mayans or all the different cultures, we've all had a fascination with how the world will end or transition or change. I think we all know it will change anyway, and that's why we look at it for how is it going to do it. And those that are really tuned into the universal acacia, where it's stored, everything that's already happened and will ever happen is stored in what's called the universal acacia. So someone really tuned into that can go into that and get specific information like Nostradamus did, or like the Egyptians did.
These things aren't taught anymore, Leon. The fact that some of us actually have those gifts or have a part of our brain that can tap into what some have called the wireless internet.
Well, that's the control game. You know, you couldn't control this planet if we were all clairvoyant. And there are nasty entities and beings that are also on this planet. It's a free will zone, and it's a multidimensional reality we live in. So nobody wants humans clairvoyant. How could you control the masses? That includes the presidents, but that includes all the alien energies and all the weird, nasty dimensional energies that control and feed off human pain. So nobody wants this taught. It really is the secret.
Before we let you go, that place of hope that we all want to hold in our heart, no matter what we experience, no matter what we see, no matter how many dead bodies that may fall around us, no matter what may happen in the future, how do we maintain that hope?
I think you're going to have to create that hope, and I think you're going to have to visualize that hope. You know, I think that if these things do unfold for a lot of people, for Americans, it's going to be a good thing because they're going to know why this is happening. I mean, this will be kind of like the Christian Holocaust. It'll be an attack on the Christians. You know, the only ones that aren't going to take the mark are going to be Christians, because they're not going to take the mark. So an American that doesn't care about that might take the mark, but a Christian isn't. So this is going to become like a Christian Holocaust. And so it's really believing and having faith as a Christian, or whatever denomination you believe in. You know, I think there's truth in all of them. And so part of creating that is knowing that there's, you know, I'm trying to word this properly. The energy is going to try to threaten you and tell you we're living in a world of terror and fear and blah, blah, blah. You're going to have to see yourself living in joy and happiness and living with God, and just feel that in your mind, feel that in your body, really just visualize that 5 minutes a day to separate from all the energy that'll be going on around you, and really having faith. And so I want people to consider the rapture theory, that that's a real thing, and it's not something that happens in one day, and it's not something that causes trauma. It's something that people won't even notice is going on. So if you're really being threatened, God is that there for you, that he can send an angel down into your room right now and open some dimensional door up and take you physically into that another realm and keep you safe from anything. All this stuff, all this horrifying stuff. So you just have to believe it. So you just have to create it. You just have to visualize it. You have to see yourself living in that level of joy and being that loved, you know. So that's the best answer I can give you.
At the very least, you got to put your mind there, because there is a war on for your mind. Leon, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
I definitely would like to have you on in 6 months' time just to see where we are at that point. I definitely appreciate your work.
Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me tell everybody.
I believe Mo's on the line. Hello, Mo.
Yes, Mr. Alex, how are you? And thank you very much for the beautiful program, especially Mr. Leon. Whatever he says, it's accurate information, because personally I saw 3 times in 3 different dreams. I saw 8.3 earthquake off the San Diego. And when he was talking about San Diego, I just said, oh my gosh. It makes sense, you know, what I saw, the dream and the vision, and makes sense. So that's what I was going to share it with you.
Go ahead, caller.
Hi.
Hi.
This is Max.
Hey, Max.
How you doing, Alex?
Very good.
I got a quick question for you. Besides preparing ourselves mentally and whatnot for the events that may occur, how can we prepare food, stock, hold, shelter, and also making our relatives and loved ones aware of what can happen?
Okay, first we'll do with the family and friends part. And you get to a point where you just give them a little bit of information, you plant some seeds, and you let go. And that's the short version of that. From personal experience, quite a bit of it. But on the end of preparedness and self-sufficiency, in terms of food preparation, right now the costs are going up for grains. But you can still get some things organic for less than $1 a pound if you buy in bulk.
So I suggest doing that, being a part of a buyer's club, learning about gardening, even guerrilla gardening, urban gardening, doing things that you weren't doing 10 years ago because we had the supermarkets to get our food to us. At least training yourself to be a little bit more self-sufficient. So in terms of food supply, you see a lot of people out there trying to sell you stuff that's really just a ripoff. They do it for you, they package it, you know, and they crank up the price to make a profit of it. It's a business. But if you do it yourself, you learn about the basics, buy 25 pounds of organic jasmine, organic basmati, get some grains, learn how to rotate your food. And there's a whole bunch of websites that you can go to learn about that. One great one for food storage is simplyliving.smart.com. Then there are things to learn about shelter. There are also things to learn about on the positive end, granted that we have the ability to be self-sufficient in a crisis and we're not being killed, is learn about making homes out of cob, natural materials, things of that nature. Thinking about preparedness on a deeper level than just buying some sort of camping gear, putting together a pack, and hoping that gets you through the night.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Max.
Have a good
Max is the son of an old roommate that I had 5 years ago. He found me on MySpace last week. It's funny, all the different people that you meet 5 years later. Do we have another call? Go ahead, caller.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, I tried to get in last week because you seemed really pretty down about the fact that you feel like you're talking to the wind. And I want you to know there are people out here who are on task and on track. I'm planting fruit trees in my neighborhood and doing everything I can to get everybody to put in gardens, do more vegetable gardening. I'm trying to hook my neighbors together so that we have each other's back.
Fruit trees.
Yeah.
I just had to bump that in. We need to plant more fruit trees and get rid of these damn shrubs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the city I don't think the city could be totally sustainable because there's not the acreage to do the rice or the wheat or the corn. But there are a lot of other things that you can do intensively that really make a difference. And the other thing I think that's really imperative in this is if there is a calamity coming, and I have every expectation there is, regardless of how extreme it is, we need to be pulling together, not beating each other over the head. So I think people in their neighborhoods really need to be focusing on their neighborhoods and building that community. And I just wanted to communicate to you, because I've been watching you for over a year, and sometimes you just seem like you think you're the only one out there. You're not. There are a bunch of us out here. We may not get on the phone frequently to tell you, but there are things going on, and there's certainly a lot more to be done. But don't feel like you're the only one there. You're not.
Thank you for your call.
You're welcome.
If you can make it quick, we'll take one more call, but it'll only be about a minute or so. What I want to say to that real quick is that we are seeing a lot of change, and people are reacting different ways. About a block from my house, I hear 8 gunshots last week, and some people still want to play the game, a game that I don't want to be a player in. The world of the illusion, the world of fighting, even beyond the political realm, just people responding to this strange environment, taking on the, some would say, demonic energies in a possessive almost type of manner, acting out the imbalances in their own lives as we rape the earth more and more. How strange is it that we mirror these behaviors in our own world? I don't have all the answers, but I have a hell of a lot of questions. Here's the deal. By summer, those out there that have been watching the show for a long time might want to think about setting up a town hall forum on a weekly basis. How do we actually form together in a protective, tribal fashion without the violence and keeping it focused exactly on what we need to focus on, and that's saving our ass? We have 2 minutes left. Briefly, we'll go to this call. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I had a premonition. I'm a psychic. I had a premonition when Leon was on, and his name is actually Noel Gallant. His name is an anagram. He's an angel, and he's walking the earth, and he is a messenger. And he doesn't even realize this, but if you will, next time you speak with him, let him know that his real name is Noel Gallant. Oh. And he's never liked his name. He doesn't know why, but that's the reason why, is because his true name is Noel.
Okay. Well, I'll pass this message on to him and send him a link of the show when it's on Google.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for what you're doing, man. This is the information that we all need to have.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that call. I also want to thank my crew. They've been working frantically to get the graphics up throughout the evening. We're actually going to have a new graphic system. We already do have one, and I have to learn that piece of software in the next week or so. We had a couple other articles. Marvel Comics' vehicle for the New World Order. They're getting involved in comic books now and putting their message out there. Also, how strange is it that much of the news and announcement that I gave to you came from the UN, and they're definitely a focus of ours in causing a lot of these problems. How the pursuit of trendy possessions is mentally damaging our children. That from the UK Daily Mail. You could find that at alexanswering.com. If I, as a man, as a human being, did not have the challenges in the past that literally forced me to grow internally, I wouldn't be here before you now. And that is what gives me the hope for the future. Until we meet again next week, I'm Alex Hanser reminding you, the path to the ultimate truth still starts within.
For those that don't know me, I'm a professional clairvoyant. I've been doing it since my adolescence. I have training, but I also have it in my genetics to be able to see energy, see spirit. And I've always had unusual dreams, and as my clairvoyance was awakening, these vision dreams started to happen. And I distinctly remember the first one dreaming about watching TV and seeing an earthquake in LA and waking up the next day and thinking it was so real and spending all day searching the news for that earthquake, and yet nothing had happened. And a few months later, that exact earthquake, the Northwood earthquake, manifested. I had a vision of Malibu fires. So those kinds of awakenings are kind of what showed me that I was psychic, and then I got training, and then I've been doing it as a professional my entire life. In the late 90s, I had another period of visions about the future, one after another, hundreds actually, and then I wrote most of them down, and they showed me a series of events to happen for America, for the world, and it's never been something that works as promotion as a professional clairvoyant. As a professional clairvoyant, I work with people. I help them through their personal crises. I'm a healer. So talking about the end of the world with people, it doesn't really market yourself. So it's not something that I generally like to talk about. It's very personal to me. And I've kept it really close to my heart. In fact, I really have shared most of it as myself on your show. And so recently, especially with the Japanese earthquake and what you mentioned with the increase in solar activity, there's been a series of visions that have shown me that the predictions that I've seen during those 90s visions are really starting to happen. So it's activated me a little bit here.
All right. Where would you like to begin in terms of the visions? For those that don't know, I contacted Leon several years ago because I came across something that he posted on his website. And the word I want to use is synchronicity. A couple years ago, I started encountering this synchronicity more and more of people that have had some of the same dreams, some of the same visions. And Leon, where would you like to begin with this?
Well, I know we've talked, or you've talked a lot about China and upcoming wars and things that are going on, and one of my visions started out with wars. Now, mind you, this was before 9/11, but I had a vision of a nuclear terrorist explosion in New York. Now, we did not have a nuclear terrorist explosion, but there was clearly a massive terrorist explosion that happened in New York that changed the world forever. And in those visions, it showed the war machines waking up, the American war machine waking up, as well as Russian and Chinese war machines waking up. And this period where America would get away with war after war after war after war until they can't get away with that anymore. And so I've watched that unfold. I've been watching Chinese military develop. I've been watching them form alliances with Russia. I've been watching these visions unfold in a very non-dramatic way. It's happening diplomatically. It's not so much of an explosion in your face yet. And so that's definitely one space. Some of these visions that have covered natural disasters have been real simple. I can just go off the list and most of them focus on America. I think that's because I'm American and I live here and I keep my attention on America and staying safe, so I tend to see events like that. So I've seen several earthquakes, 7.0 in the San Francisco Bay Area, followed 3 months later by an 8.0 earthquake. These earthquakes are very crippling. It's not going to help us on the economic levels at all. It's going to make things worse. I've seen other earthquakes, a 6.5 earthquake in New York and a 6.5 in San Diego, and also volcanic eruptions in Seattle. So clearly more volcanic activity. There was one vision where I was actually on an extraterrestrial ship, and these beings were explaining these visions to me and what I was seeing. And they made a point of pointing out the sun and showing the increased solar activity that was occurring during this time when these things would start unfolding. And they were saying quite clearly that solar activity was linked directly to earthquakes on Earth, that those solar flares, when they flow off, they're not just affecting Earth, they do affect all the planets in the solar system. Another reason why I'm kind of alerted to this, and the point that you mentioned of watching a flare hit the Earth and the Japanese earthquake pop off. Japan, I had one very specific vision of that, and it took place over a series of years. And when I started that vision, Japan had already fallen. It had been abandoned by people. You could clearly see, or I could clearly see, homes that had slid off their foundations, villages abandoned, fires off here and there. And I remember seeing Chinese military people on the continent looking for people, securing the area. And I remember watching them being very terrified of what had happened in Japan, and especially while they were checking houses and homes. That vision flashed back to before Japan fell, when it was highly populated, and that's when the earthquakes start coming and start slamming Japan. Now, there would be no way for me, well, maybe, but at the time there would be no way to realize how damaging these earthquakes are. I don't know if I would have believed
Now, Leon,
it.
don't you find it interesting, I know I do, at how for years in Japanese comic books, anime, there has been this plot of a zombie apocalypse that follows some sort of nuclear meltdown of some sort of a plant where the radiation causes people to become zombie-like. That's very startling, given that in our own society, especially in Portland, there is a massive obsession with what is called the zombie apocalypse.
Well, you know, we're all very, very psychic. So, I mean, look at Godzilla. He doesn't breathe fire. He has radioactive breath, and he's born from radiation, and that's been an icon for Japan forever. We're all very psychic. That argument goes from fiction or nonfiction. Nonfiction is written to be based on reality. Fiction is fantasy made up on our heads. But if everyone's psychic, everyone's clairvoyant, people do tap into their clairvoyance, and they might be telling a story, but it's something that they're picking up, that they're sensing. We see that in all forms of media and art and human expression, really.
Yeah, and it manifests itself in language. It's also called the collective unconscious, or the zeitgeist of the ages.
Right.
Well,
right, exactly.
You know, when people discuss China and the future, it provokes a lot of very strong opinions in people. And I've heard many people say the United States will never be invaded by a foreign country. It cannot happen. It will not happen. It is logistically impossible. The reason why I find this to be fascinating, the idea that this could happen, that we're onto something here, is simply looking at every single administration that we've had giving China top secret military technology, missile technology transfers that has happened illegally without approval of Congress for many, many years. And this is a story that both the controlled left and right should be aware of. Now, you don't necessarily see a particular timeline to this, or when or what year it's going to happen, but as I recall from the last interview, you noted that this event that comes to this continent happens after these natural disasters.
Right. I really see it starting with what's happened in Japan. Japan's going to continue to fall apart, and then once America gets hit with a good-sized disaster, especially money-making epicenter like the San Francisco Bay Area just being taken out overnight, and then add a few more on top of it, and the money problem that's gone on. I mean, to me, just clairvoyantly looking at America and and the U.S. dollar and its value, it's worthless. It's all a big joke. I mean, everyone's just propping this stuff up, holding back the collapse, but it's really worthless. And one of my predictions is the collapse of the U.S. dollar, where it is worthless, where people will burn it in a fireplace just to get the fire started. And it's the Chinese that come in and reform global currency, and China's currency will be what dominates and takes over American currency. So this happening is part of that. That's always been one big argument why China would never attack America, because they own us, and that's just a ridiculous excuse.
But one of the ideas that could be explored here when we say attack America is the potential that they could be called in to quell civil unrest within the United States when a turbulent situation is already going on internally within our own country. That is to say, the possibility that peacekeepers could be called in or invited into the country to deal with what that which controls our government calls domestic terrorists. But again, I'm just mentioning this as a possibility.
And that's how my visions have shown the Chinese, and that's how they spin it with their propaganda to promote themselves to the rest of the world. They are peacekeepers. They are coming in to bring order to chaos. But the definition of that can get really out of whack. They may have to do that in Japan. I definitely see them in there, and they may have to do that here. But some of those arguments are also about American wealth. Russia gets involved here, and it's about Americans hoarding wealth and keeping it from the rest of the world while most of the world's population goes without food, water, and shelter.
Right.
You have America, who's the wealthiest country, keeping it all, bankrupting it, throwing everything into chaos. That becomes a major issue, and also America's war history of just constant war after another. So part of peacekeeping is stopping the Americans from what they're doing, raping the earth. So that can start out with really good intentions, oh, we're here to help, but the argument can get really quite out of whack.
Right, and there are some people that would welcome the Chinese, believing that is a better system. For those that are watching this show that are hearing this for the very first time, this idea that this could happen, there is some information, some data, some facts that you can look up while the web is still up and operational. Take a look at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the alliance between China and Russia, where the common enemy is the United States. Also take a look at Idaho, at the governor, Butch Otter, welcoming the Chinese to build a massive technological self-contained city. I know you've read about this, Leon. And so these things that you're saying seem less far-fetched as time goes on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised people don't really see it. I think the big problem with the end of the world is people's personal perception and people's personal beliefs and people's personal realities. And so as the world is changing, it's not just external. It's not just going to be a war or an earthquake or this or that that's going to make people wake up and change. It's stuff happening inside people right now. People either losing their homes or money's not working. Things that used to work just aren't working anymore. And it feels like the end of the world. It's really just an old way of existing falling apart. But it's happening to us individually, but it's starting to show itself in the greater scope of it, the planet. So, the biggest problem are people being unconscious to this, not being aware of it. I remember specifically when war breaks out on American soil, Americans don't believe war could ever happen here. They've never seen it other than a civil war. Our generations don't even know what that's like unless they've joined the military and gone and been involved in war. People at home here don't really know what that's like. And I distinctly recall that no one had any idea who was shooting at us. Missiles start showering down on the East Coast, hitting government installations. People start flipping out, see this on TV, and they don't even understand the world enough to understand who's attacking us and why they're attacking us.
Okay, you mentioned Russia being involved in this. In the past interviews, you mentioned the East Coast primarily, where the Russians were coming in. I'm sure Alaska is going to be a hot spot as well. What cities do you think are going to be most at risk, and where do you see some of the potential safe areas?
Well, I want to say there's the war stuff that I've seen, there's a lot of safe things. There's rules of nuclear war, and there's only 3 countries that are going to use nuclear weapons, and America is not one of them. So there's never going to be a nuclear detonation. I know people have had visions of that. That's why I mentioned me also having visions of that in New York. Well, there was a terrorist explosion, but in a dream, it was told more of a story to see this nuclear, the most scariest kind of explosion that triggers the world into a new cycle of advancement. So I know lots of people out there listening have had visions of nuclear wars, but I've had visions that specifically address that and clearly say that there's rules of war. And the Chinese have already let us know that. I mean,
Sure.
The Chinese have let the Americans know that if they're ever engaged in a conflict, they'll have no other choice but to nuke 200 U.S. cities if it comes down to it. So it sticks to conventional weaponry. Nuclear weapons get involved when the war moves from America over to the Middle East as Russia comes through Syria to try to get democracy and get out Israel out of there. And that's when Israel fires off one preemptive nuclear weapon, and Russia and China both respond to that with their promises of carpet bombing any country that dares set off one nuke. It's too much of a risk. So it's not mutually assured destruction that's keeping them from doing it. It's basically here's the rules. And so that's pretty safe, in my opinion, for Americans. Don't have to really worry about that. And also the missile strikes from Russia in the East Coast were very targeted. They had very advanced weapons that could focus in and blow up a government building on a block that also had civilian apartments, for example, on the same block, and just take out the government installation and cause very minimal harm. So most of those strikes are all military strikes along the East Coast. The chaos comes from people waking up that day and turning on the TV or hearing the radio, and people running in the streets and going kind of postal. On the East Coast, on the West Coast, when the Japanese come in, they're coming in person, in fleets, coming up again as peacekeepers to try to bring order, because again these missiles fall, and in 1 hour's time, once this starts, Americans are all going crazy, running around, driving somewhere, not knowing what to do, totally panic-stricken. And that's where, again, you get that excuse for peacekeepers to come back in and bring order to chaos. And the Chinese will be offering us things: money, part of a new financial system, freedom from the fear that everyone will have been in after a couple of years of war. But they're never really going to take over. So as they invade through California and Oregon and Washington and start to make their way to the Rockies, America is an armed country.
Right.
And I don't mean our military is armed. Our civilian population is armed. And they're never really going to be able to successfully do that. But they will be able to occupy parts of the West Coast. And that's where you'll see concentration camps. That's where you'll be seeing people, Americans, being given a choice. Do you want to take this new financial system? And this is where you're going to see the mark of the beast. Do you want a little implant that will have $100,000 for you to start your brand new life with if you just agree to come to this new world order? And some people will do that. Some people will be in so much fear and terror that they'll just accept anything. And some people won't, and those people will get thrown into concentration camps. And people in Europe and people in Africa and people that are watching stuff on TV, they're going to be seeing the happy Americans coming out with the Chinese for this new world order of sharing the wealth with everyone. They're not going to see the concentration camps where Americans, especially Christian Americans, who refuse to take something like a microchip in their
They will
hands.
show them what they want to show them, especially when China has more control over the U.S. media.
Right. And then once you're in the concentration camp, they'll retinal scan you for, just like your tag mark. And it's horrifying to what I've seen go on.
Okay, now there's several patterns at play. When a military invades a tribe or invades a country, there are certain things that pop up.
rape, sexual abuse, torture, human trafficking. These are some of the things that we've already heard about, stories coming out of the Middle East at the hand of what NATO forces, U.S. forces, European forces have been doing. DynCorp is well known to be involved in sex trafficking in the past, and they've still been given contracts by the Pentagon. Senator McKinney confronted Rumsfeld on the fact of this in the year 2006 before the floor of Congress. So, in light of what we have seen in the past, when we know what happens when war takes place, when people are not ready, how big of a factor do you see human trafficking being a problem, specifically trafficking of women to locations outside the United States? How strong of a threat do you think this is?
It's a huge, massive threat. It's not even a threat against enemies of Americans. It's a threat against fellow Americans. So you have to realize, as America, we're going to be sitting here, and sure, an earthquake might pop off over there, or some thunderstorms rip up some stuff over here, but we're still going to stick around. The moment of collapse, especially if it's from missiles falling down, whatever it is, the moment of collapse, that's when people go crazy. We're really addicted to our realities, our money, our cars, our things. If you lose all of that and you're running and abandoning the cities and cars with family or by yourself, there's a level of stress involved that most people don't have a clue about. And people will develop post-traumatic stress. People will see opportunities to steal from one another. People that haven't had for most of their lives will loot and rape and take and steal.
Right.
And in fact, as I recall, the Antichrist, who his chant when I had a vision of him was, give to yourself, above all else, give to yourself. And that's partly what brings the world into chaos, people taking what they want from another. So Americans are their own threat, especially from the East Coast. And I've specifically seen along the Mississippi River Valley is kind of where a lot of those gangs form, kind of like, Mad Max. There's still safe zones, like along the Rockies, especially the eastern side of the Rockies, and it's just God doing His work.
Now, how do you see
He's
Oregon?
just guiding all the people together and that want to be violent towards one region, and the people that want to love and work together to another region.
And the state that I'm in, Oregon, do you see anything specific? Of course, we have different regions where we might be facing different challenges. We have the coastland, 60 miles in, you have Portland.
Seen everything that's ever going to happen. So Portland and certainly get some disasters. You guys have volcanoes over there. I know there's at least one volcanic eruption that happens. It's actually very civilized. It blows up relatively rapidly. I don't actually know what city it is exactly. I just know it's a major city. It blows up pretty rapidly, but there's plenty of time for people to evacuate. People follow instructions, and it's very, very orderly.
I do want to mention here,
death toll.
as a footnote, that not all of this is entirely catastrophic. There are some people that have envisioned there's a book called Ecotopia, and Ecotopia kind of spawned the idea of Cascadia. Cascadia being a large region of the Pacific Northwest that, in theory, could break off from the rest of the country in a meltdown of the economy, of the government as it currently is. And I think a lot of people would view that as a positive thing. Granted, we could deal with the threat of the Chinese. There certainly are a lot of armed men in this state, and there's certainly a lot of wealth that I believe in the future will be funneled, especially food, out of the state. But I do believe, Leon, I'm blessed to be in a place like this.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I live in San Francisco, Bay Area. It's beautiful. I wouldn't move just because there's 2 earthquakes coming. I'm just prepared for that and ready to deal and help with my neighbors and get through it.
How do you want to talk about the bigger picture in, let's say, the next 12 minutes that we'll have you, what you feel all of this means? I'll say this. I suspect there is a dark hand that is controlling this whole situation simply to destabilize the vibrational frequency on Earth, as David Icke and many others have talked about. And I can see that hidden hand, that military-industrial complex glove, all over the planet, in Russia's business, in China's business, in the United States. Obviously, a lot of it's spawning out of the United States and Europe. But why do you think all this is really taking place, and where this is going to go from here on out?
Well, this is where it's all about spirit and entities and beings and what's really controlling the planet. And as a clairvoyant, one of my specialties is spirits and aliens and demonic forces as well as angelic, but as a healer I'm generally having to focus on these dark vibrations. I've really loved quantum mechanics and the concept of a super universe and the fact that we live in our own universe and then there are other universes there. As a Christian and someone who sees beings, I name them. So this super universe is what I call God, and our universe is what I call Christ, and another universe is what I would call Lucifer. And so there's different kinds of universes filled with different kinds of energies and forces. Now, there's one or the other. You're either in alignment with the Creator, so you're kind of doing what, the Creator's original intent for everything is to be, or you're following something else, whether it be Lucifer or Nephilim or other dark kinds of universes that pierce ours. These darker ones don't respect our free will, and they're also a bit psychotic, and some of them hate God, and so they want to disrespect it in as much way as possible. And when you look back at one of our earliest governments, the Egyptians, and how they set up a system of control to make one or two people king, the wealthy owner people, the gods in their eyes. There's also a time when these beings came onto the planet. So there are very negative spirits, and they're all over the place. It's like nature. In a cubic foot of air, you've got 10,000 microorganisms. In the ocean, cubic foot of water, probably twice as much. Life permeates our reality. It's also permeating these other universes. The only thing to do here on Earth is have a body. We're human beings, so we're spirits too, but we've got bodies, and so we have the power and we experience this reality, and it's the only thing to do here. So if you don't have a body and you're here, you're hanging around people with bodies. That's what we call spirit guides. And certainly an angel that's helping guide you down your life is a spirit guide, but a nasty being that wants you to feel bad about yourself, gets in your head and gives you negative thinking. I mean, they're around. Everybody has this kind of vibration, but it's very organized. So if you look at someone like Lucifer, who's kind of the hierarchical of everything, and then you've got devils and different levels of demons and alien vibrations that aren't in alignment with the Supreme Being, or dark spirits that aren't in alignment with the Supreme Being, they're coming through us. Humans have the ability to channel. Like I said, we're human beings, so you have the ability for your spirit to come and sit in your body and occupy it. You also leave your body every night when you go to bed, and you go to the astral plane and you dream.
Sure.
And then
so,
the next
Leon,
day you get back in.
So the phrase psychic protection is not some new age mumbo jumbo. It's something that we ought to be perhaps looking closer at.
Being able to control your energy, our society doesn't teach that, but it's the energy that we're talking about here, these dark vibrations. If we taught everyone in kindergarten simple psychic tools for grounding their body and bringing their spirit in and separating their personal aura universe from everyone else's, those demonic forces would never have a grip on control. That's why we have a programming system. Little kids go into school and they're told what's real and not real before they really hit adolescence and have a chance as spirit to get in their body and bring their own truth in. By then they've been programmed up the yin-yang, what's real, what's not real. So we do have these a television is an alien technology. It was invented in San Francisco by a man who fiddled around. But I have no doubt that there were alien energies channeling through him, helping him to do that. Create a fantastic multidimensional doorway in everybody's home. People stare at it and information loops out from the TV through their body and back into the TV, and vibrations can get programmed into people. Certainly, again, it can be used by angelic, good-hearted people by creating shows that are inspiring or amusing, but oftentimes it's used to promote dark agendas and dark vibrations and dark concepts and things that people aren't even aware of it. We talked before the show about Katy Perry's new video, and that's right there. When I heard that extraterrestrial song, it was horrifying because I listened to the lyrics.
Well, let me mention that. I haven't mentioned that on the air yet. We don't have the video to show, but for those watching online, if you watch Kate Perry and you type in E.T., I've talked about Lady Gaga before, ladies and gentlemen. Now we see this promotion of the female being desecrated, the feminine, the goddess image, into a role of a sex slave that's serving some sort of a dark entity, not just man, but something even far darker. In this video, she's romanticizing, she's fantasizing about being raped by an alien. And what do you think this means, Leon? Why are we seeing so much what I would call alien propaganda? Also in the film The Knowing with Nicolas Cage, he gives his children to the aliens that appear to be greys to save them from the world ending. It's strange propaganda.
Well, it is a very strong propaganda, and, you know, I do believe in Illuminati, and whether it's a real group, it's just a word that means something. Human beings that are actually worshiping these beings and trying to control that information. In my visions, I've seen rapture. There are angels that are extraterrestrial in the universe that have ships that can help us and deal with stuff. They follow God and they do whatever Christ says to do. So when it comes to the end of the age, their role is directed by the Messiah. But I've seen them in vision helping us, taking people in rapture, and they may have even done it in the Japanese earthquake. There are more missing people than there are bodies accounted for, and we'll never really know. Sure, some bodies are going to wash up here and there, but in my visions, I've seen people being taken right before the earthquake hit.
Let me ask you this question really briefly. Outside of the Bible, are there any other texts that also talk about rapture as well? I know there are some people hearing what you're saying, and they're thinking that you're a religious nut based on a perception, but I want to hear more about this idea of this potential. I have heard other stories in other texts outside of the Bible mention a similar event.
I'm not, you know, it's from what I've seen, and in fact, some of the stories of where the concept of rapture originated from was a little girl who had dreams of it. And, you know, there's prophecy in the Bible alone that in those end days people will dream dreams and dream of the future. Everything I know about extraterrestrials and beings and entities comes from perception. It comes from having been able to see them. I've had to help hundreds of people get rid of demonic alien influences. And the good guys aren't a problem because they're respecting God, so I don't generally have to do anything, but they will communicate. I've had two specific visions. One vision I'll never forget, sitting in San Francisco at a time when I was a little scared of the earthquakes and dying in it. And it was so vivid, I just thought the earthquake hit, the building collapsed in on me. I felt the pain and the shock. Next thing I know, everything's coming up off me. My body's being repaired. I'm finding myself on board a ship with an extraterrestrial and a couple other humanoid people, and it seemed almost perfectly normal, and I had been saved from that particular disaster. Those disasters, the Japanese vision showed people sitting in their living room having dinner, for example, before a disaster hits and being taken up right before their house is leveled out, and they never actually know that something bad happened. They just never really experienced it. I think a lot of this stuff has to do with your belief. And, you know, the people that are going to have the hardest time with the future are the people that are really addicted mentally, psychologically, to the world as it is, and not able to be open to totally change in the mechanics here. And people are either going to have to die. I hate to say it like that, but, you know, think of it like an elderly person, like someone who's 93 and she's seen the world forever, and the world has worked a certain way. Her mind may not be able to handle a whole new dimension of life suddenly happening. It might be easier for her to go to sleep, so to speak, and be reborn in a new body where it's just easier to adapt to it. It's going to take a strong mind to be able to accept that the world is really changing, that we're shifting into another dimension of life, and things are different.
Change is
always
constant.
I've personally been through my 2012 fall apart, and life is much easier, but it's different. Things like money, things that are, you know, so it used to be so difficult aren't. It's just if you're clear in your mind with what you need, the universe is responding to it very quickly, but you have to let go of these old concepts and realities. And for people that don't believe in this stuff, I don't blame you. That's why I've, you know, documented my predictions and had them on the back shelf. They scare me. But then when something like Japan happens, where I wrote it down quite specifically, then it comes back out of the burner, and that's when I look at it like, okay, there's more to this. And that's why I watch Japan closely right now, what's going on. If they evacuate Tokyo, that's in my vision. That just would continue to expand.
Sure,
what
there's
happens
something
in
else
Japan is going to continue to unfold.
that probably should be mentioned as well. If we have a massive solar flare, an X flare or beyond, that disrupts the electric grid either worldwide or just geographically in one area, if the coolant systems go down at these nuclear reactors, we will have a massive, massive problem within the United States with leakage, with meltdowns, if we don't have any power to power the generators for the coolant systems. And I find that to be very interesting. Bill, if you can go to that 2012 graphic that shows the sun, the chart going up, in reality, ladies and gentlemen, it's beyond 2012. It includes 2013, 2014, the bombardment of solar particles, solar energy coming into the Earth. The Mayan calendar is one source of information that we're going through a time of great change, and the cycle is completing itself. There's also the Hopi prophecies, and there's also talks, theories about a potential second sun. And so there's so many different things going on, but I will say these are very, very interesting times. And these are very challenging times, but these are times that provide an opportunity to do something right, an opportunity to do something not only for yourselves, but other people selflessly, because I think that's what a lot of this is coming down to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, my final challenge to people would be just talk to Creator. I know I might sound a little bit like a Christian nut, but none of my information comes from organized religion. It comes from perception. I believe in a God and a Messiah because I see angels. I see demons. I know those things are real. When I was 18 and I first saw a demon, the first thought to my mind was, oh my God, well, if that's real, then God's got to be real too. And with that attitude of just believing it was real, I just started talking. So if people don't know what to do about all this stuff, you have God right there. You close your eyes at night when you go to bed, talk to Creator, and ask Him or herself to make themselves real to you. And just start being open and start asking questions, knowing you're going to get the answers. And if you're wondering about extraterrestrials and the future or aliens, you can ask the Supreme Being about that stuff. Just pray. Just talk. I mean, it's not get on bent knees and, I don't see it like that. It's just that you've got a best friend right there who will pretty much answer anything you ask as long as you just know he or she is there, and be open to whatever that is. Because, again, the Christians from dogma religions, when they talk about God, and if you don't believe in Jesus, you go to hell, I don't see God in that space. And that's kind of a big disservice. And a lot of people are there.
Now, Leon, we're actually out of time, but I'd like to have you on again in the future. Again, it's great having you on. What would you like to share with the audience about your website and some information they can access there?
Well, I've probably scared everyone, but I do professional readings.
Not this audience. Go ahead.
And it's ironic because when I read someone professionally, I don't look at your future as it's something that's carved in stone. I see you as a creator. So I look at what a person's creating for themselves in the present and in the future. And if there's any problems, I look at, okay, well, why are you creating that? Let's untangle that. I'm primarily a healer, so people that suffer from depression or different levels of mental, emotional pain, I'm very good at clearing that out. And so you can find me at psychicschool.com.
Okay, and of course there's leonlegant.com. There's some more information about you. Leon, thanks for coming on.
Our ability to be grounded and deal with this information, to deal with the energy coming in from the sun. And some people are more insusceptible than others. Some people just prefer to be controlled or control others. This is why we can't have a collective shift in consciousness as long as some people are still choosing to remain in a slave state of consciousness. Human beings that are out of alignment with their own truth are the most susceptible to having their perceptions and emotions used against them. So I think the game plan for the remainder of the cycle is to continue to manufacture a civil war and prop up external threats and internal threats. And in terms of the manufactured civil war, we're looking at the gun issue that they're that they're bringing out, pushing people against the wall, hoping people react emotionally. And I see a lot of that. A lot of people's Facebook posts, they're saying that they're ready for a revolution. They're putting themselves out there saying things they probably shouldn't say. Launch new proxy wars, conflicts, military interventions in Africa, Middle East, and Asia. The next solar cycle, the staging of World War III between China, Russia, and the United States, not until 2020. And there's a lot of quantitative information, and it doesn't mean that we can't change it, but there's a lot of quantitative information that they want to go in this direction.